All right, good morning, guys. I hope everybody is doing okay. Hope you guys had a great day yesterday. I hope you guys are doing okay. Let me see in the chat box. Let me see in the chat box how you guys are doing today. Go ahead and put in the chat box. Let me see how you guys are doing today. Hope you guys are doing okay. All right, all right. So I see you doing great, doing okay, doing well. Okay, all right. So yesterday we kick off with Agile, and today we will we'll continue on that journey. I believe yesterday we ended up maybe here. Okay, here. All right. So yesterday we went through all the ceremonies from daily stand-up meeting to user story grooming, feature set grooming, and we talk about retrospective meetings as well. And we also talk about sprint planning and kickoff meeting, right? And then we went into estimation. We talk about estimation as well. And then we ended with sprint review, and then also talking about sprint demo as well. And then let me reiterate the point I made yesterday. Somebody asked a question on sprint demo meeting. It is not a separate meeting by itself. Sometimes maybe some organization, they can set it up just to make sure that they have, like a dedicated time or enough. They have ample time to show to stakeholders the kind of product and the feature sets that they've built, so they can do that as well, right? So they can show to them that they can have that, dedicated time where they gather together, and then they will just they do nothing but just demo to stakeholders what has been done. But really, a lot of times people confuse sprint review with retrospective meeting, right? But they are separate event. While sprint review directly focus on the product. Retrospective meetings really focuses on processes and efficiency, performance of the team, etc. Right, and then sprint review directly, talk about product. That's the main objective of the sprint review meeting. All right, so today we're going to continue. We will continue today. We will continue today. So today I want to start with Agile life cycle, right? Agile life cycle, right? So, every product goes through what we call the SDLC, particularly the waterfall type of model. We have, the SDLC, which is the software development life cycle. I know now you guys are like, gurus. You guys can tell me from front to back to front, what the software development life cycle is, SDLC is, back to back, without blinking, right? In Agile, we all know SDLC is core, from traditional product delivery model or software delivery approach, but in Agile specifically, we have the Agile development lifecycle. So typically, what you see on the screen here is the Agile development. Sort of, this is a process, stages or phases that we typically will have to go through to be able to ship something out of the door, right? To ship something out as a product. So we have the initiation or feasibility stage. Before the kickoff of any kind of project. Yes, as lovely, as nice as these features might sound, we still have to sort of vet the viability of this product that we want to build, right? So it will go through like a rigorous, um, vetting phase, which is the initiation and feasibility of the project. So stakeholders will sort of talk about this, why they want to do this, and get some approval at that phase. So here we talk about, is this a project or the idea worth, doing? What does it solve, right? There are questions that we need to answer. What does this, solution, this problem, or this, solution solve for us, right? As a business, what is the return on investment, the ROI, right? We got to be able to know. It might sound cool, it might sound okay, the feature is nice, customer is going to be happy about it, etc. But it must make economic sense, right? I'm going to tell you guys, it doesn't matter whatever that we're building, that feature must make economic sense. What is the value here? So two types of value. It must deliver value for us as an organization by way of the ROI, the return on investment, and it must also deliver value for the customer as well, the end user as well, right? So that's the initiation and feasibility phase of the feature that we're trying to build. And then we'll move on to the release planning, right? The release planning. So for release planning, this is where we sort of, develop the release plan for this feature. We come up with a schedule for it. We work with stakeholders to be able to sort of define the vision, the strategy. We capture all the feature sets that must be committed, to this release. A release, spans across. It is not just like a sprint only. It could be. We can also look at release as a period of time where the different pieces or component of a particular product module will be shipped out, right? Will be, deployed. And so we need to come up with a release plan and say for, maybe release 1, release 2, release 3, release 4, release 5, etc., etc. This is what we will have to deploy out, right? So we plan ahead like that. The reason why we plan ahead like that, because the product that we try to deliver is not a small product, right? It's a very huge, humongous, type of feature. And because as a team or as an organization, we have constraints, right? We have several factors that are constrained for us. Resource capacity is a constraint. Time is a constraint. We have other constraints as well. And so even if we wish that, we'll deploy this out, let's say by yesterday, it's not going to happen, right? We wish that this product should have been out of the door even yesterday, but it will still not happen. And we can still not deliver it. We will still not be able to deliver it within a week, within a month, within 2 months. So this is why prioritization and then release planning is critical. We need to plan ahead and say, for day 1, right, the first day, what are we shipping out? For day 2, what are we shipping out? For day 3, what are we shipping out, right? We plan the roadmap, ahead like that, right? So that's why we have MVP. MVP is going to be the first one, the first version of the product that we're going to ship out. If it's a new product, right? If it has never existed, this is from concept level. That is that is where we start talking about MVP. That's why we can talk about MVP, even if it's an enhancement, right? Maybe it's a big enhancement, but usually when we say MVP, we talk about something that has never existed, right? It's a new product from concept. So that's release planning. So we need to have a plan ahead before we sort of want to ship anything out. And then we set up iteration 0, right? So iteration 0 setup is very important. We set up iteration 0. Iteration, we'll talk about ideas, the different iteration sprints momentarily over here. But because the work that we want to, just like I talked about it when I was talking about release planning, it's a whole feature set, different modules, different pieces and components of the application that we want to ship out. And so in Agile, I think yesterday I talked about it, that, we have sprint, we have 2 weeks type of sprint, and then we also have the 4 weeks type of sprint. So that's the iteration, right? It's like a loop. It goes around, we come back again, we start again, we end the sprint, we come again. So that's iteration. But when we started a new project, we sort of set up iteration 0, where we begin, where it all starts from, right? So that is the setup here. We'll be talking about this in more, take a deep dive very soon. And then the execution of the iteration, right? The execution of the iteration. That's the next phase or the next step as well. The goal here is that we want to be able to deliver measurable value acceptable by the product owner, right? So as a team, we want to be able to, have something for any given sprint. We need to have a commitment and objective and say, this is what we want to release out by the end of the day, by the end of this sprint, right? And, Agile is all about delivering value, right? We want to deliver something that is useful by our customers. And so we want to be able to deliver something that is measurable, deliver measurable value that will be acceptable by the PO. The product owner, you are the one that you like the gatekeeper, right? So when the team members are done developing something, and you tick all the boxes and it meets what we call the definition of done. We're talking about definition of done maybe later on. When it meets the criteria, the success criteria set up for definition of done, that is where the product owner accepts it and say, okay, all right, I can tick all the boxes, and yep, what you guys have done is exactly the expectation of this feature set, right? So execution iteration. So every sprint, we got to make sure that we are delivering value that will be acceptable by the product owner, right? And then once that is done, we have the pre-release phase. So we prepare for deployment. Of course, every product that we build, we are not building it for ourselves, right? We are not building solutions, platforms, systems for in isolation, right? We're not building for ourselves. We're building it for end client users. Both internal and client users and external and client users as well, partners, vendors, etc. And so we got to prepare for deployment so that we ship it out so that the customers can start using it. And we want to deliver something that will have something for our customers that will deliver exceptional customer user journey and great customer satisfaction as well. So that's the pre-release planning phase. And then the last one, once we prepare for deployment, we actually ship out to production, right? So we operate and then we support what has been shipped out as well. So this is the typical phase of the what we call the agile life cycle, agile product, life cycles, right? So now let's take them one by one. Let's take these steps here, the life cycle here, one by one. Hopefully we can get through a lot, and then maybe next week we can start writing user stories. And before I forget, I will need everybody to put in your email in the WhatsApp group that we have for this batch. Put in your email so that in the course of the week I will work on your accounts in Jira and then set up everybody's project. So that by next week, we get it ready. You guys will start writing user stories, etc. So let me not forget. So go ahead, do that so that I'll not forget. So in the course of the week, I'll take some time and then, provision your accounts in Jira and set up your projects as well. All right, so let's start with the first one here. So let's start with, the agile lifecycle, initiation and feasibility, right? So typically, like I already summed it up in the previous page, but, I just want to give you guys something to write, like notes. I know you guys are writing notes here. So here, agile lifecycle, the first stage, as I talked about it in the previous slide, initiation and feasibility. So here is where we capture the project vision, right? The project vision is right here. And then the ROI justification. I talk about ROI, right? So the return on investment justification. Every product gets vetted very well before we say, okay, all right, It's a go or no go. Do we go for this, or do we say, nah, this is not a great feature for us to spend money on, right? Commit high budget and spend money on this. So ROI justification, very important. This is where we also capture the higher level features, the high level, the as is and to be, right? So let me explain what is the as is and then the to be. I remember in college, one of my professors taught us this, the as is system and then the to be system, right? The as is system is the today, the current state system, right? The asset system is what we have today. So today, the problems that maybe the pain points that we are experiencing on the platform, at the beginning of the project, the initiation phase, we look at all these things, right? The asset system. So we take a deep dive into the asset system. What is prevailing today, right? And then we also talk about the to be system. The to be system is sort of like the desired future state of the system, right? That is a to be. So if you guys hear anything like that, to be, and the as is, and then the to be is the future state or the desired state, right? That is where we want to get to, the sort of like the final destination, right? That is where we want to be, but we are not there yet, right? And so as we kick off with the project, we talk about the assets, the current state, and then we do some gap analysis. We identify gaps. We know our problems, and then we sort of go through different, solutioning phases, and we walk our way. We develop our way to the to be system or the desired state or the future state system, right? So that is it's also important, note here. We need to be talking about this in this phase. And then we have the alt solution analysis, right? So the alt solution analysis here is the alternate, solution analysis. So, just like anything, we are not naive. We are not ignorant of the fact that, whatever that we want to build, we got to be looking at the alternatives, right? If we go this route, what should happen? If we decide that this is what we want to build, etc. If we don't do this, then what is in there for us, as a next thing, right? So it's very important, the alt solution analysis, the alternative solution analysis. Are you guys with me so far? Let me see the chat box that you guys are with me so far. I see Salim say yes, William, Reid. Okay, all right. I know you guys are with me. All right, so that's the alt solution analysis. And then, in the initiation or the feasibility stage as well, this is where you identify your team. You also identify this kind of skill set that is required to be able to burn and churn out that solution as well, right? So you identify the team. I say, okay, all right, this team is capable of doing this. This team, maybe you would have to get an outsourced team as well. This is all an important conversation to have at this very phase of the development life cycle, right? So sometimes, we are out of capacity when it comes to resource capacity. We might not have the wherewithal, right? We might not have the right team, maybe with the right skill. Maybe that feature that we want to build, we need specific, skill set to help out. And so it's very important that, we identify the team, and we talk about the team as well, that, the team might be, we may already have an existing team, but the team might, they might be full at their capacity. They're already building something. And so if we're bringing new feature set, etc., we need to start, talking about it as well, that, is the team going to be capable of handling all these additional new feature or new product, etc. So, very, very important, very, yeah. Very, very important, very, very important in this process. So identify the team and make sure that their skill sets, matches up to what we're trying to build, and they will be capable, right? Again, at this initiation stage or feasibility stage, this is where we need to sit down and then, talk about critical stuff as well, whether we should buy, we should build, vendor, etc. So as much as we have a great team, great developers, great all-star team, and our all-star team can build this product from the scratch. They can build from the ground up. We can also decide to buy, like a COT product, COT, a COT product. That means off the shelf, type of product, right? So we can decide that now for this product, let's look for an alternative solution out there, maybe from a vendor, a third-party company who they've already built some of this. It's off the shelf, right? It's a COT product. We can get a product like that, and then we can simply move on, right? And maybe do some customization in there, and then that's it. We are done, right? So we need to decide: is it a buy, build, etc. Type of decision in there, right? Or should we buy, or should we build it ourselves from the scratch? Get a vendor, etc. to deliver this, etc. So all these conversations are in there. We'll talk about high-level costs, building of roadmap, create initial cost estimation, etc. And then finally obtain funding and support for the project, right? Every project you guys already know, because you guys know from the first slides, from the first training videos that you guys had, we talk about executive sponsor and other project sponsors as well. And then, the solution owner, we talk about all these people, individuals that are typically in a project, right? So we got to be able to obtain funding and obtain support from them for our project. So that's very important. So that is the first phase in there. And then let's talk about the release planning, right? We talk about the release plan. We talk about the initiation, and then we have the release, planning as well.
Quick question.
So if you have a question, we take questions at the end of the time, the last 10 minutes. That is where we take all questions. Write it down. So the Agile Lifecycle release planning, right? Agile Lifecycle release planning. So we move from the initiation stage to the feasibility stage. We move from there. Then the next stage is that, okay, right now we've obtained funding, approval, etc. We move on to the next step. What's the next step here? That is release plan. We plan about what we're trying to build, right? This is where we take a deep dive into the feature set that we're trying to build. We develop the feature. We list these feature sets in our backlog. And then the next thing is that, again, the backlog, we're talking about backlog very soon. Backlog is is a place where you see all the wish list. Like it's like a wish list place. All the things that we want to build in this feature, because it's going to be right there, right, as a backlog. And then we prioritize the stories based on the business value and dependencies, right? We begin to take a deep dive into prioritization of these user stories, look at the business value around the user stories, and then dependencies and risks, assumptions, etc. All of those things are taken into consideration. So that is a very important thing as we thinking of the release planning, etc. That's very important. And then estimate story points, right? So as we start looking at the feature sets that we're trying to build, we begin to now wrap our heads around, okay, what's the effort, required to be able to, get this out of the door. So we begin to talk about sizing, story points, etc., estimation. We begin to think about all these things as well. And then we develop an initial release plan, right? We develop an initial, release plan. And then update cost estimate, cost estimate. So as we move ahead or we move along, we'll be getting some accurate, what the certain thing is just guesstimation, right? And as we move along, you'll be getting, the real accurate estimation and thought, okay, now that we're talking about this proper, now we know, oh, this is required. We're going to need, we will need something like a third party to APIs to get something within the feature done. So we begin to update the cost estimate as we progress along, right? So that is it. And then I talk about the iteration zero setup within the Agile lifecycle. So iteration zero setup, right? So Iteration zero setup. So that's where we start with a sprint. We set things up. So we talk about setup environment, right? You guys remember, I know you guys remember the various environments, correct? The dev development environment, the QA environment, UAT staging, production environment. Let me see the chat box. You guys remember that video, right? Because I talk about it in there. We set up all these environment, make sure that environment is ready for our release, our planning. I know you guys remember that in the video. So we make sure that we have dedicated environments, for our development. We cannot have QA and development team all in the same environment. That is not good. That is not a standard, right? Here, I'm training you guys to be all-star international level. That is how we think. QA and devs cannot be doing the same thing. UAT stakeholders cannot be testing the same box. We need to have dedicated environment for everything. That is a standard, right? That is a standard. So here, iteration zero setup. So setup environment, hardware, software, team, area, etc. We start talking around this subject. And then high level architectural models as well. We look at high level business process models, high level database models as well. So for every feature, we might have tags in there. We might have to build some database stuff in there. We may have some other things as well to consider, architecture, infrastructure, overall technology stack, etc. You take a deep dive into all these things whilst, we're thinking about iteration zero, sprint zero setup, right? So look at this, look and feel, site navigation, etc. We talk about this team training. We can also talk about team training here. That do we need training for what we are about to, for what we are, we've set up to do? Do we need training on agile business processes, technical stuff? We talk about all these things as well here, right? So that's the step here for the agile life cycle as iteration zero setup. All right, and then we move into the execution of the iteration. So now we get into the sprint. Now we're getting the real work done, right? We're getting the real work done here. So the execution of the iteration is, the planning meetings, the daily stand-up meetings. Yesterday, you guys heard me talk about daily stand-up. This is where, we start the actual stuff, right? The team start getting ready, we get busy. There's the meat and potato, right? The heart of everything. So the daily stand-up meeting, active business participation. We start development work. We start some automated testing and TDD, test-driven, data-driven stuff. QA testing, user acceptance testing, pre-planning, backlog grooming, code design, code review, demo, retrospective, all those type of development activities, right? Yeah, it's right here. Basically, it's all right here, right? And more. This is not the exhaustive list of things that gets done within this life cycle or this phase. So planning meeting daily and all these things that you guys see here, that is what we get done whilst we are execution of the sprint, execution of the iteration, right? And then we move to the next phase, which is the pre-release phase. So the agile lifecycle, we have the pre-release phase. So this is where, we're done, everything looks good. QA has tested, giving us assurance, giving us the comfort levels here. Yeah, everything is good. It meets our standard. Let's go ahead and deploy. Let's go ahead and ship out, So we run through a couple of things here: final system testing, final acceptance testing. We finalize our documentation. Sometimes we'll have to prepare, end user documentations for, operations team and customer service support team, etc. So we finalize what is that, when customers start using it, and then there are questions they can refer to this, guide, user manuals and user guides as well. Pilot test the release, train end users, train production staff, and then finally, what happens? We deploy system into production, right? So we deploy out there, and then the last one is the agile lifecycle is the production, right? now that it's out in production environment, what happened? We operate the system, and then we support the system as well. We identify defect and enhancement. So as it's in production, it's almost in maintenance mode, right? It's in maintenance mode. And so here, sometimes we might, some of these things might slip in a bag, a defect might come back. And so we identify it, we fix it, and then also as it's in maintenance mode or as it's in production, we'll begin to see that, oh, we should have added this feature to it. So that qualifies to be an enhancement, right? Something that future we can add on, right? So as in production environment, we begin to look at enhancement. What can we add to this that will make this process better, right? We begin to gather and list out enhancement stuff, right? So that's very important. And then transition support, to support team. So we are done with our job. We sort of hand over to a support team. There's always a support team that handles some of this stuff for the production, for the operations team and customers, etc. So this, guys, is the Agile life cycle, right? Agile life cycle. This, guys, is the Agile life cycle, guys. All right. Good. We're doing well with our time today. All right. So let's talk about the iterations, right? Let's talk about the cycle of the iterations here. We're down talking about the entire life cycle of the Agile. And let's talk about the iteration. Iteration is what yesterday we discussed, the sprint. 2 weeks. Yesterday we looked at the calendar. See if I can go back a little bit here. And yesterday we talked about the sprint. We said if a sprint starts from the first, if it's a 2-week sprint, organization culture. For the first, it's going to end on the 12th, right? Yesterday, you guys remember, I told you guys. And then if something starts from the 15th as a new sprint, it's going to end on 26. Let me test you guys, right? Let me test you guys. If we start the new sprint on the 3rd, right? On the 3rd, that's Wednesday, the 3rd of February. When is the sprint going to end? Let me see in the chat box over there. When we start the new sprint from the 3rd, when is the sprint going to end? We start on the 3rd. I see that Daniel said the 10th. I see Ray says 14th. I see Nana Osable says, Joshua says 16th. Okay. I see Salim says 17th. Yes, it's a 2-week cycle. I already told you guys it's a 2-week cycle for this one. Yes. So Daniel, you've come back again. It looks like you've taken a U-turn, you've changed your mind. You say now the 17th. Okay, Reed says it's 2-week cycle. So you come back again. Reed has also changed his mind. Say, okay, all right, it's the 16th now. Okay. So I'm getting 16th. Looks like 16th and 17th is winning now. So looks like 16th and 17th is winning. It's winning now. All right. Okay. So guys, take note. From the 3rd to 9th should be 1 week, right? That's of 1 week, because the 3rd is 1 day, 4th is another day, 5th is another day, 8th and 9th is 1 week of the sprint. So the 2nd week start from 10th, 11th, 12th, 15th, 16th. So 16th is when we will end the sprint. Take note, right? Make sure your calculation is on point. It's 2 weeks release cycle, right? 2 weeks release iterative cycle, right? That's a good test for you guys this morning. It's 2 week cycle. So when you start something, when you kick off with something, you know exactly when we end in with this, and then you know your expectation. All right. So let's go back to our sprint agile iteration. Right. So pretty much, if you look at the loop cycle, if you look at the cycle of the sprint. It is not difficult. We plan something, we design, we build, we test, we review, and then we move on to the next iteration, right? Sprint 2. So if you look at sprint 1 on the screen, we plan a feature set, we design something, we build, we test, we review, and then we move on to the next one, right? We move on to the next one. And then we launch it, right? So we launch it. And then we move to sprint 2, right? The next cycle. So as you guys said, 16th. So 16th has ended. We deploy the feature set that we've built for that 2 weeks. We show it to stakeholders. They're happy about it. We are excited. What do? We launch it. We move on to the next one. So from the 17th, we kick off with what? Sprint 2, right? From the calendar. My inference is from the calendar, guys. For the calendar 17th, we start with what? The new sprint 2. So sprint 2, we plan, we do our sprint planning, design, build, we begin building, we test it, we review. Sprint 2 is done, we launch it, right? You guys can see. Let me see if I can mark this screen, but I hope you guys are following. So plan, design, build, test, review. Sprint 2 is done. What do? We launch it. And then we move to sprint 3, right? We move to sprint 3 here. We plan, we design, we build, test, review. Sprint 3 is done, we launch. So it is in that continuous iteration, continuous loop, right? That is how, in a type of world, in an typical agile world, that is a flow of things. That's a sequence, right? We get into different sprints. So, some teams, they are like in sprint 40, sprint 50, sprint 60 something, because they're building the big stuff, right? So they started not today, they started a long time ago. So they've been building from last year. So there might be the current sprint. When you get into a project, ask them of the current sprint. You got to know where they are, right? It's very important that when you get into a project, you know the current sprint. What sprint are we in now? You ask questions, relevant questions, right? And here, whilst I'm saying relevant question, let me also say that don't ask silly questions, right? Don't ask questions that maybe you figure it out. You could also see that, it's even there, as well. But relevant questions like backlog, what do you guys have in the backlog? Where is your backlog? How's the backlog looking like, etc. These are relevant questions. Sprint questions are relevant questions, right? So they're in sprint 16, they might be in sprint 19 or 21, etc. You will need to find out when you join a new team, right? Very important. So that is the loop, right? Every sprint iteration, that is a loop. We go in that cycle, we keep going, right? Till the entire application is done. So in our classic example of the remittance platform that yesterday we started looking at, or we started using, so we're going to keep going till maybe if there's an international remittance and everything works fine, we've integrated mobile money into where I can sit here in the comfort of my room and maybe grab my phone and send money to somebody in Ghana. Everything works fine. UAT is done, complete with launch out, then it's done, right? So we're going to keep going all the way to all the features, all the things that we want to commit to the product is done, complete. All right, so that is the loop that I wanted to show you guys here. Let's move on. So, in any typical Scrum team, there's a methodology, right? There's a process flow. I want you guys to get it, right? There's a process flow. I want you guys to understand. So as we look at the iteration, the sprint, each iteration of Scrum is what we call, or is what is known as the sprint, right? So as you guys saw, sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 2, whatever, the iteration, that is what we call sprint, right? Keep in mind. I want you guys to, in a pop quiz, I'm going to ask a question like this, and I'm going to need somebody to sort of translate all this process and share with us here, what goes into it, right? So it starts here. Each iteration of Scrum is known as what? A sprint. And then product backlog. Product backlog, I talked about it not too long ago, is the list where all details are entered, right? Are entered to get the end product. So, in a given product, we will have different features or components in the module or in the backlog. But when you look at the backlog, that is all the things that we want in our product. And at the end of the day, we will have an end product. We'll have a complete product done, finished, right? So that's a product backlog. So all the list of the feature set, all the list of user stories, etc., that we want to commit to that end product. That is what the product backlog. Guys, take note of this very well. The product backlog. So during each sprint, the top user stories of the product backlog are selected and turned into what? The sprint backlog. Yeah, that's a pop quiz question, right? It is a typical pop quiz question. So take note. There's a hint, right? I'm going to ask you guys the difference between a product backlog and a sprint backlog. You got to be able to know the difference between a sprint backlog and a product backlog, right? So during each sprint, the top user stories of the product backlog are selected and they are turned into what? The sprint backlog. So that's what, in any given sprint, we don't work on everything in the backlog. We prioritize some of the features in the overall product backlog, and then we bring them up into the sprint. And the features that we have prioritized from the product backlog is what turn out to be what? The sprint backlog, right? So we have 50 features that we are building. We cannot build all the 50 features, guys, in one given sprint, right? And so what do? Because of our capacity that we have, we take some of the top stories, some of the things that we prioritize, and then we begin to work on it. But what we, grab from the product backlog to prioritize to work on as a team, that is what we call in here as what the sprint backlog items, right? Or PBI. So take note, guys. So in every given sprint, team members work on a defined sprint backlog, right? So team members will start working, in the sprint backlog. They start picking up the stories. So as you guys remember, we talk about a daily stand-up meeting every day of the week. We come together, and then team members will give their statuses, particularly with developers and then QA, right? They'll give status of what they have worked on previous day, what they're going to be working on today or the current day, and then what if there are any impediment, any showstoppers, etc. for them, so we can resolve those issues for them, right? So that is the team members working in that given sprint. They're working on that sprint backlog. That's the items for them to work on. And then daily, team members check for the daily work. Team members check for the daily work, right? That's the daily standard meeting that I just mentioned, right? So if you look at the Scrum methodology, that is a process flow. And at the end of the sprint, team members delivers product functionality, right? The goal of every sprint is that at the end of the sprint, or when the sprint that is in flight comes to an end, we should have a usable product, right? That's the beauty of Agile. And that's what separates Agile from Waterfall, right? The beauty of Agile is that at the end of the day, whatever that we have at the end of the sprint, it should be a usable, deployable product that can go into production environment for customers to use, right? This is why we say we want to be able to deliver value, measurable value. So if we cannot take it out to the market, we cannot take something out, that customers can start using, then we are not building a feature yet. It's not something we can consider, right? So at the end of the sprint, the team delivers what? Product functionality. So every sprint, the goal of every sprint is that we should have something of value. Okay, guys, keep in mind, we should have something of value. We should have something that is useful, customers can use. Something that customers can use, right? Something that customers can use. They should be able to use this, right? So as you guys will start, translating your the embedded lending project that you guys did, the BLDs. You guys will start looking back again to your functional requirement stuff that are in your document. As you guys start writing user stories from that, make sure that your stories are what? Usable feature, right? So this is a time that you will look back to your own work and say, but this thing that I wrote here, I don't think we can develop this. So make sure that every feature, and I think Reed did a good job at that stage. So you guys can go back and refer to Reed's presentation, how he grouped, and I think some of you also did the same thing as well, how you group the functional requirements and all the specs, feature set that needs to be developed, into, I think he itemized them, if I remember correctly, he lays them out. So that's going to play out here, because you begin to write user stories for each one of these feature, right? Useful, valuable product functionality. So at the end of every sprint, we want to have something else. So, if you're something that you're writing, it cannot be a product that they can use. It's time that you really look at it again, right? Okay. All right. So that is a process flow, guys. Take note. This is very important. So each iteration of the Scrum is known as sprint. Backlog, or the product backlog, is a list where all details are entered to get the end product, right? That is all the things that we want in the product. So if you look at the backlog so if we were looking at, if we today we're looking at the embedded lending project, and then you look at the backlog for that embedded lending, if I come into your backlog, and everybody's going to have a backlog, when I provision your account in Jira this week, I will expect everybody to start populating stories, into their backlog. And so when I look at your backlog, I'll be able to see all the things that will be in that product, and everything that's supposed to go into that product, we will see it all in that backlog, right? And then as the team begin to work on, they begin to prioritize, and then we have sprint backlog for every 2-week cycle, right? And then the team members only work on their sprint backlog items, and then every day they check their work, and then they move on. That is the beauty of Scrum, right? And at the end of every sprint, again, guys, we have a product that can be used. Again, that is a beauty of what Agile. We don't wait. We are able to, churn out something that customers can use, instead of waiting for 6 months, instead of waiting for 2 years, 1 year in a typical waterfall project, because we are doing this in Agile. We can have a small bit of the feature out of the door, so customers can start using it. We don't have to wait, right? That is the beauty again of Agile. So whatever feature that we work on, that is something that we can take to the market, that customers should be able to start using it immediately, right? Now, let me also say this here before I move on to the next one, that sometimes depending on the organization, some organizations, they have policies, right? Even though the sprint is done, the features that you guys have worked on, it can be shipped out, it can be deployed out, the customers can start using it. Sometimes some organizations, they only ship out quarterly, right? They have a process in there that even though, yes, the features are done, they have been tested, everything looks good, but we will not deploy it out at the end of the 2 weeks, right? They can deploy it out monthly. They have monthly ship out. They can ship out maybe, quarterly, right? So every 3 months. Every organization is different, but the idea of Scrum, the idea of Agile here, that is the standard, that at the end of that sprint, we should have something that can go to the market, right? Company policy is all up to them. They decided to do this. They can decide to do whatever they want, right? Companies like Amazon ship out almost about 100 things a day, right? So you can imagine if they are deploying and shipping out something like that, of that volume every day. Netflix and all these big companies, sometimes they deploy. They have built this culture of that continuous deployment, etc. They have about 100 things being deployed every day, right? But again, their environment is stable. We'll talk about some of these things maybe later in the future. Sometimes if your environment is not stable and you begin to ship like that at that rapid rate, right, that frequency, you might end up breaking a lot of things in your production environment. But for them, maybe the infrastructure environment, they have stability, they gain stability in there, so they can do what they are doing, right? All right, moving on, guys. Moving on. So let's begin to look at Epic, and then we can look at the user stories. And then, I know that by next week, we will start practicing writing user stories, right? I'm excited because we're getting into the the heart of big stuff now. So let's look at Epic, right? You guys have heard me say Epic, maybe user stories. We get into that now. Yeah. All right. So an Epic. So what's an Epic, guys? Again, a typical pop quiz question, right? An Epic. So an Epic is a large body of work that can be broken down into a number of what? Smaller stories, right? And the epic is what? An epic is a large body of work, a typical, dictionary type of definition, right? An epic is a what? This is a typical, textbooks, a textbook definition. An epic is a large body of work that can be broken down into a number of what? Smaller stories. So, for example, a performance-related work in a release, right? It can be called a what? An epic, because there's so many things that can be done within that work, that related work, right? An epic can span more than one project, right? An epic, guys, keep in mind, it can span more than one project. If multiple projects are included in the board to which an epic belongs, right? So if you look at an epic, just like yesterday, I was using the classic example of the remittance. So many things, so many work that can be in there. We have internal transfer, maybe within continental, nationwide type of transfer, and we have international transfer, that's cross-border transfers, etc. Right? So many things that we can talk about. An epic, an agile epic again is a body of work that can be broken down into specific tasks called user stories. Right? This is another way to look at it, based on the needs, the requests of customers or end users. So if we're talking about epic, that is the description, the definition for an epic, a large body of work, right? That is an epic, large body of work. So now I was going to ask you guys, that was an epic. You should have an idea that, oh, okay, if we were looking at maybe like a flight booking platform, for the flight booking platform, and maybe next week I might pull something like that up, a typical flight booking platform, and then I'll begin to pick up some of the features on there that sort of, they have epics, they have user stories, etc. Next week I'll look at that. But it's a large body of work that can be broken down. If something's epic, that means it's big, it's large, right? All right, moving on. And then we talk about user story. So you guys have heard me say user story, user story, user story. All right, user story, right? A user story is the smallest unit of work in an agile framework, right? So you guys heard about epic, stories coming from epics. And now we're looking at user story. A user story is the smallest unit of work in an agile framework. It is an end goal, right? Again, you guys remember from the process flow of the Scrum methodology. At the end of the sprint, we got to be able to deliver a feature out, like a functionality out, a product functionality out, right? It's an end goal. It's not just a feature. It's expressed from the software user's perspective, right? We always say that user stories are written from the perspective of the end user, right? When writing stories, because the solutions and the platform that we are building, because we are not going to be the end users, we are not building it for ourselves. We are building it for an internal team or external team. When we're writing user stories, it's critical, very important that stories are written from the perspective. How did they assess this? You guys remember yesterday, I think I talked about the requirement elicitation, and I talk about the hows, the wheres, etc. So the user, we need to be able to identify the persona, right? The role, who the real users for this feature or for this product functionality is going to be. And we got to be able to understand, their mindset, who they are, the demographics, their age. If you're building something for people that are grown like 55 years and above and 60 years, etc., you have to be circumspect, right? You need to think about it carefully, because you're building something for people that are very old, right? And so the way they think, the way they operate, the way they look at certain things is very different. If I was building something today for 18 years old, 19 years old, completely different, generation, right? It's a completely different generation. And so when building, if we say writing your stories, we write the stories, from the end user's perspective, right? How they think, how they want something to be done, the user friendliness of that feature, etc. We write this, according to the user's perspective, right? All right. A user story also is an informal general explanation of a software feature written from the perspective of the end user. So again, the idea of this agile and the user story is that we shouldn't make things complicated. If the user wants this, just say that I want this, right? In very informal language, right? We shouldn't be complicated about this. There's no complexities in here, right? So is it a user story is an informal general explanation of a software feature. If you want password to be minimum of 8 characters and maximum characters, character limit of maybe 20, 25, etc. Just state it, yeah, minimum must be this, maximum must be this. We want a combination of maybe alphanumerical. Password must contain alphabet and then numbers as well. Must contain special characters, etc. We stated out there just like that, right? Very informal. We don't have any special technical style of doing this, right? Is written from the perspective of the end user. It's like the user or the customer is the one that is telling us that I want this done, I want this feature, I want, etc. Right? So that is how user stories should be looked at. Stories again should be looked at from what from the end user or the customer or from the user's perspective, right? I want this, I want that. Just say it. So that's how stories are written. Stories are written from that perspective. Customer will just say, I want this, I want that, I want this done, so that I can get this done, right? All right, let's move on. So, this is my own thing. I group and I, categorize user stories into types. So I've designed type of story, implementation type of story, screen wiring type of story as well, an API type of story as well, right? So design story. So because sometimes in a typical team, you will have a UI UX engineer, right? UI UX engineer will be part of the team. Sometimes, you have to give instruction to the UI UX engineer for him also to sort of design something, right? So him designing something, you need to have a design type of story for him, right? So his stories, you get with him, you give him a story to work on, and he will come up with an impression of what you were thinking about. If you wanted a form that will have these fields in there for the customer, and the customer would have to fill in, data fields for first name, last name, email, whatever, and then you give him all the instruction. The UI UX engineer will, use this tool. It might be using Adobe, Photoshop, Adobe SD, or maybe Figma, or the tools, the great tools out there for designing. And then he'll design some UI, for you, for the kind of things that you've instructed him in your story, right? And then he'll bring it to you. You review it. If that's what you want in your story, you say, yeah, let's go. This is exactly what we want. We wanted this form where users can have a submit button at the bottom and etc. And that's it, right? That's the story. When this story is done, or when the UI UX guy is done, you will need an implementation story, right? You will need an implementation story for the development team. So it's going to be an implementation story for the design card, right? So you have a couple of cards that you write as a user story. User story is also known as cards. So you have the design card, the implementation story, or the implementation card as well. So the design, when it's completed, is injected into the implementation user story, right? It is what injected into the implementation user story, so that the development team, when they grab this user story, they know exactly, because they have a design attached to the story, so then they know exactly what the story is asking for, because they have something to look at on the side, right? The design will be attached, just like a PNG or JPEG or whatever. It will come maybe in like a ping or something for file format, right? So the UI UX will design something, and then you will attach it to the story that you will write for that feature or functionality, and that is the implementation story. And so when the developers, they grab the story, they look at it, they have even a design attached to it as well. And so they know exactly what you are talking about, right? What you are talking about with this story, or what you want out of this story, right? So that is the what we call the implementation story, right? Sometimes there are other type of stories. Don't worry about the names here, like screen wiring. There is nothing like a screen wiring. If you go and ask your team member screen wiring, they don't know. But it is my idea here to sort of explain to you what is going on with this type of story, and you should be able to see, okay, this is a story. It connects to this. So screen wiring means that there are business rules, business processes from front end connects to different, the screen is wired to different things, at the back end, right? So we are not just, collecting the data. We're collecting the data, but the data that's being collected is wired to something. It's tied to different processes that are in there as well. So you got to be able to know, okay, so this one goes in here, this one comes in here, etc. Right? There might be some data in there, some other business logics, etc. You got to wire your implementation stories very well when you're writing it. Very important. And then some stories are also very technical stories as well. We have API type of stories. You write this kind of stories. Sometimes very detailed and very technical as well. And you got to know this. So here we see the types of user stories played out here. We have design type of story where you work with the UI UX engineer. And again, let me also sound this here that it's not every company that you will have the privilege of working with a UI UX engineer, right? When you have a UI UX engineer as part of your team, I say that you are blessed, right? So it makes your work very easy. So those of you that started singing hallelujah, praise the Lord yesterday because you said, you're not going to do mock-up screenshot. Hey, this morning, I want you to rethink again. this morning, I want you to think again, right? So those of you, I know yesterday, some of you were very excited because we started talking about Agile. You're all excited that, oh yeah, we're not going to be doing this again. Now, this morning, I want you to, rethink again that it might happen that yes, yeah, somebody said bye-bye, but goodbye to Wireframe yesterday. It might happen that, yes, you may have a UI UX as engineer as part of the team. When you have that, then great. You can start singing your goodbye to Wireframes and all that because you have somebody to do all that kind of work for you, right? Yeah. You will be blessed to have somebody like that. But if not, then tie your shoestrings, saddle your horse, and then get ready, right? Because you would have to come up with mock-ups, wireframes to be able to, show to your development team sometimes, not all the time. Sometimes you have to show them exactly what you want them to build, right? So don't get excited yet, right? don't get excited yet. Not yet, yeah. So not yet. All right. So we have design story, we have implementation type of story, screen wiring, API integration type of user stories as well. All right. Let's move in. So when you write the user story, this should be a guide for you when you're writing a user story, right? When you write the user story, and let me say this, guys, what we are talking about right now, this is going to be about 60%, almost 70% of what you're going to be doing, right? User stories, whether you're a product owner, business analyst, etc., this is going to form part of almost 65 to 70% of your work, right? The product owner, business. So what we are doing right now is a critical component, right? Take this seriously more than anything else that we have discussed, right? The user story piece that we're getting in now is the meat and potato of everything, right? You spend about 60%, 70% of your work here you spend 10% of your work, of your time on meetings, etc., stakeholders, engagement, etc. You'll have another 10% maybe with development team clarifications and development team meetings, as well as Scrum ceremonies, agile ceremonies, etc. But I'm going to tell you, 60 to almost about 70%, I'm going to be honest with you guys, it's going to be right here. So what we are discussing right now this morning is critical, right? It's very, 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 very important, right? If you were looking for it, if you're waiting for something that is serious, that you're going to take serious, then this is it, guys. Then this is it. So number one, when you're writing a user story, define the end user of the product feature, right? I cannot say this enough. Define the end user of the product feature, right? Who is going to use this? Who is the persona, right? Who is going to use this feature? We need to know. You need to know. When you're writing a story, you need to know that this feature is for who? Who is going to use this? The persona. So we got to define the end user of the product feature. Number two, specify what this end user wants, right? So every feature, every story that we're writing, there's always the what of the story. What is the customer looking for? Customer might say, I want something, I want the ability to do this. The feature might be saying something like that, right? So specify the what, specify what this end user wants, right? This is critical, guys. This is going to be 60% of your time you're going to be spending writing stories, right? Okay. Specify what this end user wants. Specify what this end user wants, right? And then the next one, describe the benefit, right? When we do this, then what happens? What are we going to achieve, right? You have to describe the benefit. Describe the benefit. And then the fourth one here, the last piece here, is that add acceptance criteria. Where number one, number two, number three is done. How am I going to measure success? How does success looks like, right? You add the acceptance criteria. Add the acceptance criteria in there. You add the acceptance criteria in there. So that's the success criteria, right? You add the acceptance criteria in there. So number one, define the end user of the product feature. Specify what this end user want. Describe the benefit, and then add acceptance criteria. That's it, guys. This is the guide for writing your user story, right? This is going to be your guide. So don't miss it. Very important. Write it down. Make sure that, stories, your user stories, every piece of this, number one is there, number two is in there, number three is in there, number four is in there. That's it. You are done, right? All right. This is a template because I want to help you guys, right? I want to help you guys. I'm giving you guys a template of the user story. So again, I gave you guys the previous slide, this 4 here. And I'm going to give you guys again a good template to use, right? Still, I'm helping you guys. Make sure that, when you're writing a story, you have these pointers as a guide, all right? A good user story must contain these 4 or 5 properties, right? A good user story must contain these 4 or 5 properties in there. I'll say 4 or 5 because one of them, yeah, you can choose to ignore it, but at least 4. There are 4 things out here that are critical that we must see out there. So number 1 is the role. The role in there must be in there, right? The role must be in the story, user story. The goal must also be in the story. It's critical. Benefit or expected outcome must also be in there as well, right? The benefit or the expected outcome must also be in the story as well. Now, description or additional information. This is the one that, yeah, sometimes you might choose, you don't necessarily have additional information in there, right? But definitely you need to have acceptance criteria in there. So the 4 critical ones, right? The 4 critical ones. And now, from next week going, when you guys start writing stories, When I look at your story, I'm going to be looking at the 4 ones first, and I will look at the 5th one, right? The 4 major ones, the role must be in there, the goal must be in there, the benefit or the outcome, expected outcome must be in there, and then acceptance criteria, the 4 critical ones. And then I can look at your additional information or other descriptions that you have in there, additional information for the development team as well, right? Additional information. Guys, take note, it's what additional. We just adding this, right? We are just adding it. But at least these 5 properties, every user story, it's a critical that we must see this in there, right? We must see this 5 properties in there. So the role must be identified, or the persona who's going to use this, right? Who's the end user? That's the role. The goal, I want something. Stories are written from the end user perspective. Someone say, I want something done. I want to have a form so I can fill in my application so that I can submit whatever. That's a goal. Benefit, so that I can turn in my application, so that I can do this, right? That is a benefit or the outcome. And then acceptance criteria. We'll be talking about acceptance criteria very soon. Let me see the time. 7:40. Oh yeah, we have about 45 minutes more, so we should maybe we might have enough time to talk about certain criteria. All right. So an example of a user story here. This is a critical example, a class example of a user story. So user story will typically have this. Now we put in the pointers that I've aligned up above here, into a story, a sentence. So as a role, so the role here, who is the role? It could be an admin, as a customer, as a user, as a maybe an internal operations team member, as a something. So the role you put in, we make sure you have the role in there. Be specific about the role. Don't just say as a user. What user are we talking about here? So as an admin, as a developer, as a whatever type the role might be, make sure you have it out here as a role. I want, then you talk about the goal in here. I want the ability to submit this. I want the ability to fill my personal data, so that then we are coming into the expected outcome or the benefit, right? Must be in there, so that I can have this. Guys, this is it, guys. You write the user story. This is your template. As a role, make sure you're following this part. This part must be followed, right? You cannot skip this. You cannot do something on your own and just write something that you want. No, this is the pattern, right? As a role, I want the goal, so that this can be achieved, right? You state it in there, and then in the story you'll have the acceptance criteria also specified in there. This is so easy, right? This is so easy. This is in Agile. Whilst we are not writing BLDs, etc. When we have a feature to write on, this is how we're going to follow. This is a template we'll be following, and we're writing our user stories, right? As this is a template, very easy, very, very easy. So guys, the role, the goal, the benefit or the outcome, description, additional information, acceptance criteria, right? Very easy, very straightforward, right? All right. I still want to help you, right? I still want to help you guys. So I'm giving you guys another set of template again, right? So as you write in your story, it's going to follow the same pattern again. As a role, I'm starting from the left side, right? So I'm looking at the left side here. As a role, I want the goal, so that benefit, right? And then you can have additional information, description, and then acceptance criteria will also follow. So in that sequence, right? As a role top, I want this, so that, and then if you have additional information, you put it in there, or you put it out there. And then if you have acceptance criteria, you list your acceptance criteria as well, right? Again, another template on the right side, as a user type. So maybe an admin, a customer, who is the user type here, right? The persona, right? Same thing. I want a certain functionality done. I want that's the function, so that the benefit, guys. Again, same template. This is not a departure from what we have been talking about so far, right? Same pattern here. As a user type, I want the function, so that this benefit will be derived or will be achieved, right? The description is in there. additional information that acceptance criteria is also in there as well, right? So here is your template, guys. We're going to be using this template as you guys start writing stories, user stories for all your projects, right? We're going to have the EL, we will have the embedded lending, we have the church platform one that you guys did. You guys will practice with that. We'll practice again with the pizza project and then also the e-commerce project, your last project that you did for the BRD, right? So don't make a mistake. This is going to be a template that's going to be used for all 4 projects, user stories. For the rest of the training, it's all exciting stuff, right? It's all going to be user stories. And then I think I have some database stuff in there, SQL stuff. And then we'll talk about some APIs as well, talk about change management. And then we're almost coming to an end, right? But, we'll start talking about some of these things whilst you're still writing your stories, because you already have your projects done. And so we will not wait for you to finish. I'm not going to wait for you guys to finish with all the user stories before we continue with the training. So I'm going to have some time where I will review your stories, make sure that everybody is getting aligned, your structure looks good, for user stories, etc. But essentially, we'll move on so that we'll be able to finish with the training on time as well, right? So the template to follow, this one, don't miss it, guys. Don't miss it. Again, because I want to guide you guys and I want to help you guys, I'm giving you another template again, right? This is the meat and potato of everything. I told you guys 60%, 70% of your time, you're going to use in writing stories, right? So as a situation, I want something, motivation, it could be in that line so that expected outcome, this can be achieved, right? So you have a description, and then you have your acceptance criteria as well. Or as a who, right? That's a user, the persona, the role, right? As a who. So who are we talking about here? Who is the end user here? I want what? So the what part of the story is the goal, right? Same thing. It has still not changed. Same thing. I want what? So that, why? What is our why? So that something can be achieved. That is our why part, right? So the story, we have the who part, the what part, and the why, right? So that as a, the who, I want the what, so that the why. And again, you see that the description and the additional information, that's acceptance criteria part, it has not changed, right? Still remains the same. Guys, this is your template. I've used almost about, I'm giving you pointers, the role, the goal, the benefit, the outcome here, the acceptance criteria here. You see the role, the goal, the benefit here, user type, function, benefit, etc. I'm giving you all these pointers so that you don't miss it. I don't want us to get into the time where everybody's writing their story and then you are the only person, still missing out. This is the guide, guys. This is a template, right? Very important. All right. So let's talk about user story, some fun facts that I have here, right? So once you write a user story, once I'm giving all these pointers, they are great. But as you write user stories, I want you to keep this in mind as well, right? I want you guys to keep this in mind. So number one is that user stories must have only one goal. User stories or user story must have only one goal. Now, it is advisable to split stories with 2 goals. So when you begin to write a story, and then the story goes like, as a customer, I want the ability to, fill this form and then fill this and then submit it, and then I can get this application done, and then also pay my Visa card, pay the payment for the maybe application. Right then and there, that you're getting into multiple goals, right? Stories must have only one goal. If it's just an application, that is application. If you bring in payment, you're talking about a different goal here. So we cannot have the application, the payment, all these things that you're describing here in one story, right? The moment that you realize that the story looks like I have more than one goal, then you know that it's time for you to split it, right? It's time for you to split your story and say, okay, it's time I split my story. So you just must have only one goal, So once you get to the point where you know the story, okay, it looks like you're achieving the application, you're also achieving something else, you're achieving something. No, no, no. You know, you need to split it, right? Very important. Every story, number two, must fulfill a requirement with a specific goal or benefit. So as you write the story, you make sure that the story at the end of the day fulfills what? A requirement with one specific goal and one benefit. So you cannot have more than two goals, like I said, or benefits in there, right? This is very important thing to note as well. Size of a user story, the third one here. Size of a user story is measured in story point to deliver value complexity, right? So as we will talk about sizing maybe next week. Yeah, looking at my timeline, maybe next week, talk about sizing in Agile. But, story point estimate is the most go-to technique that is used for sizing of a user story. So when we are sizing stories, we are sizing stories to sort of to be able to deliver value, to be able to measure the complexity of the story, right? So yesterday, you guys remember when I talked about it a little bit when we talk about the ceremonies on estimation. So when you look at the user story, by the complexity, by the business value that the story is going to be delivering, we'll be able to align or point that story out and say that story is a 3-point story, is a 5-point story, or whatever it might be the case, right? So we assign story points to this user story, right? And the last one here for the fun facts that I have here for you guys is requirements. A requirement of a story has to be of a complete functionality, right? So you guys remember when we're talking about the process flow of the Scrum methodology, right? Talk about that, at the end of the sprint, what we deliver out of the door, it should be what? A full product functionality, right? Same thing. So user story, make sure that user story is what? Something that is good to go. It's complete. It's a feature by itself. And when we are done with this, customers can use it, right? Very important. Guys, these 4 points, don't forget, right? Write it down. Don't forget. Don't forget these 4 points that I have here. Very important. As you write the story, it's going to guide you, right? Especially the top one. Stories must have only one goal. And some of you, we're going to be talking about this because I'll look at your story, and as you're sharing your story with all of us, and then I'll let your team members, they'll start asking you questions, and then they'll say, why does your story have, you within one story, you want to achieve this, the goal is this, the goal is that, the goal is you have almost about 3 benefits in there. That is not possible, right? Stories must be granular enough, small enough, right? So keep in mind. So let me look at my time here. We have some 34 minutes or so. Okay, all right. So let's talk about this. User story grooming. So yeah, we start talking about the ceremonies, and then we talk about story. We talk about grooming ceremony, right? This one I want to take some time and talk about a few things in the objective of grooming, right? It's very important that you guys capture these details as well. So the objective of grooming or refinement meeting. Okay. So the objective of what? The grooming or refinement meeting or technical feasibility discussion sessions is number one, for us to be able to sit down whilst we're looking at these features, whilst the product owner is sharing, share the feature that they want, he or she might want us to work on. The goal is to, number one, to be able to remove all uncertainties. So as we talk about a story, and as a team, we take a deep dive, we talk about this, okay, we want to achieve this, this is what we want to do. What we are doing in essence is that we are removing all uncertainties. If we had doubt, we had some ambiguity, we were not clear on something, whilst we are talking about it, while we are grooming and refining the story, we are removing what? All uncertainties, right? Number two, as we're talking about it as well, sometimes, we'll be able to identify a risk. I say, okay, that's a risk. Well, if we do this story, if we implement this story, this is going to impact on maybe an already existing platform, another feature that might depend on something else. If we are changing something, if it's going to be a database, something, there's a task involved. As we're doing grooming, as we grooming the user stories, it's also another way that it helps us to identify risks, uncertainty, something that could happen in the future whilst we're doing this, right? And then we also can identify dependencies, right? So as we groom the story, we know that, looks like there's a dependency here, right? We will need something. This story depends on something to work. It cannot work by itself. So we either have that, thing that is a dependency work on first. It's like almost like a precondition, right? It's almost something that would depend on something to write on. So we got to be able to identify the dependencies, right? So grooming, we got to identify the dependencies in there, help us to identify the dependencies, right? So grooming sessions as well is also at a time that, we also get to split big stories to smaller stories, right? Small stories. So when stories are big, we know, okay, now this, we need to split this. So as you and the development team members, you're talking about the story, you talk about this feature, they know that, no, we need to break this. This is too big by itself. Let's break this. Let's have this as a user story by itself, and let's have this as well also as a user story by itself, so we can work on it separately, right? Because this is too big as well, right? So at a point or at a time of grooming, that is where we split big stories to smaller stories, right? And then user stories, clarification, right? So you, the product owner, you're bringing this issue, this story type for the team to work on. That's the time that they'll also have questions, and then you also have the opportunity to also clarify as well, right? So as they ask questions, you're going to be clarifying, right? Keep in mind that you are the single point of clarity for the team, right? You as a product owner, the business analyst, product manager, whatever your title might be, you are the single point of clarity. You're the guy that is asking them to build this. And so you should know your product so well so that when they ask you questions, you will not leave them in doubt, right? So user stories, clarification. So grooming session gives us as a team members the opportunity to clarify certain things that we did not understand. And sometimes to even you, the product, you might not even understand it all, but the technical team members, development team members can even explain certain things to you better on how this should work as well, right? But make sure that you understand certain things better before even you take it to the team, right? Very important. This is very, 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 very important. At the grooming level, this is also a time or session. Sometimes, we also do prioritization. So once we're talking about this, we know that, let's rearrange this very well. Story A should be worked on first because story B will depend on A. So, in a way, prioritization is creeping in, it's coming in, right? We're beginning to see, okay, this one is important than this one. Okay, so this one should go to, we should prioritize this first. We should prioritize this user story first, and then we'll come to the next one. And then we'll follow in that sequence, right? So prioritization is also in there. It's a key objective of user story grooming. It's also a time where we also look at the current state, right? So assessment of the current state infrastructure, architecture, and whether this current state infrastructure and architecture is, they'll be able to support the stories that are in the pipeline that we're trying to build or we'll be building very soon in the future, right? So we look at all these things as well. And then stories must meet what we call the INVEST acronym, right? User stories, we have something we call INVEST, right? So like I said, stories, you must deliver a product functionality. And there's something that we call INVEST that should guide you into that product functionality. So as you write a story, you always be thinking in your head, does this meet the INVEST? But does it meet the INVEST criteria? Does this meet the INVEST? And we'll be talking about the INVEST very soon. I don't know whether it's the next slide or not, but it's in there. We'll be talking about it. So your stories must meet the INVEST. I know, guys, it's a lot of information. I know, guys, it's a lot of information that I'm pouring out here, but you guys will have some time in the course of the week. Make sure, you take note, make sure you revisit this. make sure you're looking at this one more time. I know, 3-hour slots and 2-hour slot on Sunday. Saturdays are 3 hours, and then Sundays are 2 hours. I know back to back, there's a lot of information I'm pouring out here, right? But again, I trust that in the course of the week, you guys will have some time to digest on all this information. Go back to the video, watch it one more time, and you will, if you miss something, you will grasp it, right? So very important. So meet the inverse nature, the inverse acronym, right, of the user story. Very important. Okay, all right. So it looks like the inverse is the next one here. So the inverse. So every user story must meet the inverse acronym. Acronym is just the INVES, means and that's acronym here, right? So every user story, number one, the stories must be independent, right? The story must be independent. The I in the inverse means what? Independent, right? The story must be independent. So, when you look at the PBI, the product backlog item, that's your story, it must be standalone, very independent, without any dependencies on any other PBI, etc. Right? Stories must be independent by themselves. Number two is the N. The N here means negotiable, right? Stories must be what? Negotiable. That means we should be able to change it. You should be able to bring the stories up to the team, and we should be able to change certain things, add more details, adopt something. It should not be like, you write the stories and you bring it up to the meeting and that's it. That's fine now. No, nothing can be changed. No. So stories should be what? Negotiable, right? Should be changed, adopted without breaking any explicit instruction, right? Very important. The V here means stories must be valuable, right? Does it have value for the end user, right? You cannot just write a story if it's not delivering any value for the end user. So as you guys will go back to your church platform assignment from next week going, I don't know if we're able to finish with all the things that I want to talk about before you start writing stories. You look at all your stories, the features, and make sure that, whilst you start writing, there's value in there for the end user, right? So valuable. And the E also means estimable. So can the team members look at the story, they can point to the story, and would they be able to estimate on the story, right? Very important point here as well. So estimable stories. So guys, all this I'm talking about, some of you, some of the guys that are working, right? I know some of you know some of the guys that are working. Your team members are going to depend on you. Your team members, they will depend on you to bring standards, to help with their agile culture. And some of the things we're talking about here, it will surprise you that you are the one that they will depend that you bring that change to the team, right? When you start working. They will depend on you guys to bring and drive change, right? Estimable means what? The stories must be what? Should be able to size it, should be able to estimate on the story. Very important. And then the S in the inverse acronym means what? Small. Stories must be small enough to be designed, to be coded, and to be tested within the sprint, right? Stories must be small enough. And then the T here means testable, right? Is it testing possible from the acceptance criteria or definition of that? DOD. So when you look at any kind of story, the stories must be what? Testable. You cannot just write a story and the story is not testable. We don't know how to test this, right? That's impossible. So you guys have to make sure that when you write a story, how do we test this? Story must be what? Must be testable, right? Very, very important. Very important. So guys, here is the inverse acronym, right? The inverse acronym of the user story. Because I want you guys to be able to finish to start writing story from next weekend. If it's possible, maybe in the course of the week, maybe I might grab you guys maybe Wednesday night, Thursday night, but I will let you guys know if I need to do that because I want to finish up with all this. So by next weekend, I'll let some of you start driving. You guys will pull up your Jira, will start writing user stories because I want you to finish up with all the user story stuff. And then from next week going, it's playtime. We're going to start writing stories, right? So guys, this is the inverse acronym: independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, small, testable, right? Keep this in mind. Keep this with you everywhere you go, right? When you start writing stories, make sure your user stories meet the INVEST acronym. Again, don't confuse yourself with the 5 components that I talk about, the role, the persona. This is just to stem your training, your thinking. The other things that I share with you, the 5 key things that a story must see, this is what you write in a story, right? But this one here, the INVEST acronym here, it is not something that you write in your story, but it's something that you need to know so that, it reinforces what you put out there as a user story. I hope this is clear enough. Let me see in the chat box that you guys get this one, right? Let me see. Yes, 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 yes. We get it. We are with you on this one. All right. Okay. All right. So I see from Salim, I see from Reed, I see from Nana, William, everybody. All right. Great. Everybody's on board. All right. Moving on. So user story sizing techniques, right? Whilst we're sizing, you bring a story up to a meeting and we are sizing the story, we need to look at a couple of things as well. We look at user story, we look at the complexity of the feature. How complex is this? We cannot just size a story and say it's 3 point, 5 point, 6 point without looking at the things that I've written here, right? So once we size in a story, we need to think about this very well. So before you say 3 point, 5 point, you guys should think about the complexity of it, right? Complexity of the story, the business value for the story, right? The return on investment, the value for the customer. What's the value for this? What are the risks, involved? The amount of work that is required for this, dependencies, etc. So, this should guide us into sizing. So before we say 3 point, we say, this story is a 5 point. No, it's an 8 point, whatever might be the case. We got to think about all these 5 pointers here. Complexity, business value, the risks, amount of work required in the dependencies, right? Very important, guys. And then let's look at acceptance criteria. So we talk about the role, the goal, the expected outcome, description or additional information. We say acceptance criteria. So let's look at acceptance criteria now, right? Let's look at acceptance criteria. So what is acceptance criteria? So as you write a story, and make sure that you have proper acceptance criteria in there or out there as well. We got to make sure that, we have written good acceptance criteria. So acceptance criteria pretty much is the conditions that a software product must satisfy to be accepted by a user, right? So acceptance criteria, again, is the conditions that a software product must satisfy to be accepted by a user, right? Customer or other stakeholders. So before a customer will accept it, before a stakeholder will accept it, before the user will accept it and say this is done, usually the product owner will have to tick all the boxes and say, before I accept this, it must meet this acceptance criteria that I have here in the story. This is the objective of the story. So once this is achieved, these conditions are met, then that means we're good. This feature has passed, right? All right. So the acceptance criteria is like, set of statements which describes the user's requirement or the features and functionalities of an application, right? So acceptance criteria, you will list the things that needs to be met. You say, okay, this must be in there. This must be in there. So if it's like, for instance, a first name field or an application field, etc., the acceptance criteria will be defined in there very well. And say the first name field, we must have it, it should be a text field. You must state it in there that this is expected to be a text field. We will accept alphanumeric, or we'll accept only alphabet. It's a first name field. We'll accept only alphabet in there. We will not accept, numbers. You cannot type in a number in there, right? For first name, the minimum and the maximum character limits The minimum first name should be at least 2 character limit, right? It should be at least 2 alphabets. You cannot have a first name and just only 1 alphabet, not B, not C, no. So you have to list all these conditions. That's the acceptance criteria, right? You list all these things out there and say, for me to accept this as a standard criteria, I need to see all these things in there. Minimum, maximum, special characters are not accepted in the name field, etc., etc. So that's how you define this, right? First name, last name, email. Emails must have the right format, right? Emails must have the right, email format in there. You cannot just say, Isaac or Emmanuel, and that's it. That's your email. No, it must be Emmanuel@gmail.com, Emmanuel@somedomain.com, for us to be able to accept it, right? So you define all these things. That's what we call acceptance criteria. So for you to accept that feature as done, or that story as done, all these criteria will have to be met. I hope you guys are with me so far, right? So, a set of statements that describe the user's requirement or the features or functionalities of an application. So as it's unique to the user story, the feature or issue in question, right? So you describe all those things in there. This is the set of conditions that must be met for us to be able to accept this story as what? As done, right? So number 1, you see the feature as an end user. You consider functional, non-functional performance criteria. It must all be in there, right? If you click on something and it must open within 5 seconds, you state it in there in your acceptance criteria that we will not tolerate. We will not tolerate that, when you click on something, it's going to take, 25 minutes for it to open, right? If you need some performance, if that story is a performance story, you need to state it out there. Make sure you have both your functional, non-functional criteria all explicitly stated out there, right? Your acceptance criteria must be simple and must be clear as well. Not test combinations, right? No, that's not acceptable here. So conditions that a software product must satisfy. This is key, guys, as we get ready to wrap up for today. And as maybe, we're looking at this acceptance criteria, guys, very, very important, very, very important. So the conditions, but that must be met before we say this is done. For every user story, we must have this as done. And then we say that this is completed, and then we'll move on, right? All right, moving on. I have 15 minutes. I want to make sure that I cover a couple of things before we wrap up for today. And I also give you guys some time to ask questions as well. All right, so acceptance criteria also, we have the SMART acronym, right? We have the SMART acronym for acceptance criteria. So as you write acceptance criteria, be guided by this SMART acronym, SMART acronym. So SMART, SMART. We need to be able to see this SMART acronym played out in your acceptance criteria that you have out there. So the S means what? Specific, right? You cannot have a certain criteria and you're writing anything that you want and we don't really know exactly what you're talking about. You must be very specific that I want to see this. So that's why I gave you an example. If it's a name field, first name field, last name field, whatever, we want to be able to have that in there and say, in the first name field, the minimum character limit that's going to be accepted is going to be 2 character limit. The maximum is going to be 25, whatever. Specify in there, be specific. We will not just say that it's going to be a text field, it's going to be a first name field, and that's it. No, it's not acceptable. We have to be specific, right? Very specific. And say, it's going to be only alphabet field. I've not seen a first name that is a combination of alphanumeric, right? So if you want to be, specific, state it out there that this over there. So I'm expecting that on your embedded learning, stories, the application fields and the stories that you write for the application, I'm expecting all these quality attributes out there, right? I'm giving you guys, this is a bonus point, right? this is a bonus point. So as you guys write the story for the application, for the EL, user story for that, when you write the first name field, last name, etc., I want to see all these quality attributes. Be specific with all these things out there. If it's a cell phone number field, you make sure that you are specific cell phone number. You say the cell phone numbers must be what? Might be 9 digits, whatever that digit number that is qualified as a cell phone number here in America, you state it out there. A cell phone number cannot be alphanumeric. It can be only number field only, numbers only, right? So this is the exact thing that I want out there, specific. Also, acceptance criteria must be measurable, right? Must be measurable. It must be achievable as well. And then the R means relevant. All these things, it's not something that you write out there, but something that is reinforcing the knowledge that you have when you're writing this, right? And then the T here means time bound. So, we are time bound. We're looking at something. We're looking at time where this must be achieved or this must be done, etc. Very, very important, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound. How are we doing with time? Let me see. What do I need to talk about? Okay. All right. So specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Okay. I will take this one last, and then I will leave it out for today. And then, make sure I have some time for you guys to ask questions as well. Just like we do the last 10 minutes, supposed to be for questions, right? All right. So now let's combine the user stories and acceptance criteria together, right? Let's take a look at a classic example, right? A user story. Now that we know what the user story is, now that we know template for user story, now that we also seen acceptance criteria and what acceptance criteria should be, let's put it all together here and let's see if we can have a story, for something, a product, right? So this is something like a restaurant, right? A restaurant that, if you have to be there to go and eat, you need to sort of book, right? Book a seat. You need to reserve a seat that you're coming in. You can walk in, that is fine. We're not saying that, you cannot come in, with your guest, your friend, whatever, to come and eat. You can come and eat, but again, we will really appreciate it if you can, reserve in time, right? Because, we do a lot of, bookings, and we want to make sure that, we have enough seat capacity to host our guests that comes in to eat, right? So very important. So if you look at the story, what that means is that, users will have to go somewhere online and they will have to, click on a button to book, reserve a seat that they're coming, and even specify maybe the number of seats that they want. Maybe they're coming in for a birthday, whatever. So you need 15 seats, 20 seats, whatever. We make sure that we reserve the seat for you and your guests as you come in. So this is a typical story that will take care of such scenario, right? So let's look at it, right? As a who. So who's the who here? As a visitor, right? So you guys see what morning. All right. So as a who's a who here? As a visitor, what is a what? I want to see the time slot when a table is available. So that why? So that I can make my reservation. This is a typical user story, right? We're getting into it now, and we're wrapping up with it today. So as a visitor, I want to see the time slot when the table is available so that I can make my reservation. So you guys know that we've covered all the templates, right? I want so that part. We've covered everything. The who, the what, the why, right? We've covered the role, the goal, the expected outcome or the benefit in there. We've covered it nicely. As a visitor, I want to see the time slot when the table is available so that I can make my reservation. Stories are written from what? The end user's perspective. An informal way of describing how we want the feature to be built, right? So when we come on the platform, we know we can click on a button somewhere where we can reserve a slot, and then we will know exactly what needs to be done. This is very simple. And then let's look at the acceptance criteria as well, right? Let's look at acceptance criteria for this type of story. So acceptance criteria, sometimes we have another template for it as well. So the template for acceptance criteria is giving, when, and then, right? Giving, when, and then. So giving is what? The context. The when is the event. and then then is the outcome. So if, for instance, the story that we have above, we put in this certain criteria in there to fit it. So it's going to be given that I'm registered and log in, right? Sometimes you can check in as a guest. Sometimes you might be required to log in. The reason why we might require them to log in or register and log in is that we want a repeated business, right? As a restaurant, as a business, we want people to come back. And so when they register, guess what? We have their phone number, their email, and we can send them some coupons and some maybe some location come in and we say, hey, if you eat here today, you have 5% or whatever discount, etc. Right? So we would love that our customers will register and they log in and they can sign up and reserve a seat, etc. Right? So that we know we can send something out to them in the future and they can always come back to us, right? Business is about continuity, right? Business is about continuity. Business is not about one time off. If your mindset and everything doing business is just one time and that's it, that's no business, right? Business is about continuity. We want repeated business, right? So given that I'm registered and log in. So when that's the event, when I select book, so when I select the book button on maybe on the website or platform and select maybe the date, maybe today is what's today's date? 5th. Okay, so December 5th. If I select today's date, then I can see the time slot when a table is available, right? So, for us as a restaurant, again, like I said, you need to reserve a seat. You cannot just walk in. Walking is fine, but we will serve our reserve customers first before somebody who's just walking in will be served, right? So when I'm registered and log in. When I select book button on and then select the date where I want to come in, maybe the 17th or maybe 25th of Christmas, whatever. So by this time, our tables and our calendar is getting filled because we have time slots. People are booking and reserving tables for their families and for themselves, etc. So when I select the book and I select the time, the calendar engine, from the calendar engine, the date, I should be able to see the time slot that are available. So if I select even today, right, as December 5th, I will see that maybe 5 p.m. is available, maybe 7 p.m. is also available, maybe 7 to 7:30 is available, maybe 3 to 3:30 p.m. is available as well. I can select that time to go and eat, right? So that is how it is, guys. This is a typical user story and also acceptance criteria. I know I've taken more than the time that I needed because I wanted you guys to have enough time. So I have 5 minutes, guys, and we will wrap up. 5 minutes, guys, to take questions. 5 minutes. All right. So if you have questions, go ahead, unmute yourself, say it, and then we'll wrap up today.
Hello, Nana.
No, hold on. Somebody is saying something. It says, Nana, I want to ask, when transferring our project to Jira, is it compulsory to use the very one we sent to you, or we can correct our mistakes and use? I'm asking because sometimes some of the deadlines or project may not have been complete. Yeah, go ahead, make sure that all your mistakes, make sure that storage, it's not going to be the one that you send out to me, the first version. Make sure that by this time, because you've seen how other people presented, you've corrected your mistakes. I expect that you should have done that, right? So make sure that you have the right stuff in there. All right, go ahead, Reed.
Yeah, thank you very much. You've given examples of user stories. Can we have an example of an epic?
So an epic really is not an example. An epic is just maybe remittance, right? So you will just have the grand feature that needs to work on. So you create an epic, and then inside the epic, when we start writing, just so you guys will see this, I'll show you guys. I'll let somebody present, and I'll be directing and be the person to do this. So we don't really have a template for an epic. An epic is just like the entire requirement for that module or for that feature, right?
Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
Hello, Nana. I
Yes,
have
sir.
a question about the user stories.
Yes.
So, for instance, if maybe the from the user's point of view, do we ignore what like maybe the action has an effect on the back end? Do we ignore that when writing the user stories?
No, so you will not ignore that. So everything that is going to do with that story, for us to be able to achieve the story, we need to be explicit, right? So that's why I said that, acceptance criteria, all those things are is supposed to let us know all these boxes have to be ticked. There has to be a database. The data has to go in there. We need to see this done. So whatever that it takes to make sure that feature is complete and is ready to go, and it's going to be accepted by the product owner that this is completed, it's done. That is what we need to have in there. So storage must be complete, right?
Okay. So it won't be like a separate story, one for like the user, and one for like how the back end would work. It will be like together.
Yes. It's going to be together. No,
Okay.
we will not separate it. Yeah, however, let me state this, that sometimes there are tasks that development team members must handle, and we will create a spike or maybe a task, to take care of that. But yes, the story should take care of that as well.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we have 2 more minutes, and I'm done wrapping up here.
Hello, Nana.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is a bit personal. Please, can you tell us, have you developed before? Has been a developer before?
I started off, like that.
Okay, that's wonderful. Nice, thank you.
Okay, so Nana, I have a question about the wireframes. So as we let's say we are working with a team that doesn't have a UI UX developer.
Uh-huh.
Are we going to develop high level wireframes, or will it be of a low level?
Wireframes. So whatever detail that needs to be out there for the team to know exactly what you want them to build, that's how you do it.
So will we basically take off the role of the UI developer in this situation?
Yeah, and not the UI UX, type of thing, but yeah, the mockups they are low level, right? It's not going to be, you using Adobe SD or Figma or any of the tools out there, prototype, etc. You just have to scribble. It's just a scribble. You have to draw something for them to know exactly how you want this button to be at, etc.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
That was very clear.
Hello, Nana.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I want to know some clarity here. Hopefully, when we're done with this, you'll be posting us to different companies to work with, right?
Yep.
Okay, now in the situation where I find myself in a company and then I see probably the need for, let's say, a UI developer, and I want to suggest the developer to the organization. Is this possible? Can this be done? And if it can be done, what are the channels one can go through? I'm just saying because I happen to know some fellows who are great developers and also have the potential to be project managers or go through this training that we're going through. I want to know if there is the possibility or there is an opportunity for them to have a go at this as well.
Yeah, everybody can have a go at this, but the point is that you will not be the hiring person, the person to hire team members, right? What you come in to do is what you have been tasked to do. That's all.
Okay.
If there's somebody great, that you think is going to be a good fit, you can talk to me about that person, and I'll see that person and see if I can bring that person on. But again,
exactly, that's what I wanted to hear. Yeah, thanks a lot.
All right, hey guys, it's already 8 o'clock. Any more? I really need to go.
Okay, then I just one last question on the calendar you showed us on the Scrum.
Yes.
There was a day which you marked presentation day. So when we did the exercise, and you said it was on the 16th, and then given the previous one, the next day was the presentation day. So I'm a bit confused about
I don't think it's a presentation day. You know, was it the President's Day? It's like a holiday or something here in America.
Okay. Okay. Now I see. I thought it had something to do with the Scrum.
No. It's just a calendar. Yeah, President's Day. Yeah.
Okay. So it has nothing to do with the Scrum. Okay. So
No. It has nothing to do with it.
Clarifies it. Okay. Thank you.
All right. All right, guys. I need to go. So hopefully I'll let you guys know if we need to meet midweek and then finish up with all the stories things. And then by next week, I want you guys to start writing stories. So I'll keep you guys posted if we need to do